Hey, what's going on, guys? In today's video, we're going to be going over a small logging community in Shanty town called Grabtown. We're also going to take a look at the logging and lumber industry of the Tunitas Canyon that birthed this community. The origins of Grabtown can be traced back to an individual named Eugene Fremont. Fremont was a French entrepreneur living in San Jose and operating a sawmill somewhere in Santa Clara County. In 1867, he decided to expand his horizons and bought 750 acres of land in San Mateo County. The idea was to move his mill directly to the source of new timber. After starting a firm with two partners, he set up his steam sawmill at the junction between Tunitas Creek and Mitchell Gulch. And about 500 yards up Mitchell Gulch, he set up a shingle mill as well. Now that he had two mills set up surrounded by excellent timber, the only issue was transportation of the lumber. With the destination of the lumber being the port of Redwood City, this logistically provided a challenge considering the site of the mill was on the west side of the summit of the Santa Cruz Mountains. At the time of the first mill's conception, Fremont partnered with the turnpike company to create a road from the mill site to the summit of the Santa Cruz Mountains. The construction of the road from the mill to the summit was extremely costly and weighed heavy on Fremont's finances. With this being said, he simply just didn't have enough money to continue the road to the ocean to transport the lumber by ship. This meant that his mill's lumber had to be hauled up and out of Tunitas Canyon, over the summit, and then down to Redwood City. So we're going to take a quick pause from the story and take a look around here where the Fremont Mill used to be located. Unfortunately, there are no pictures online or in print that I could find of the Fremont Mill. The culvert that you see here is diverting water from Mitchell Creek into Tunitas Creek. And according to sources that I found, the mill sat across the creek from Tunitas Creek Road on the southern part of the junction. And this is still speculation, but I believe it would place it somewhere behind the bridge here to the right. And there are some pieces of squared off looking lumber here in the creek, but it's hard to say what's what considering this mill stopped operating in 1879. Shown here, however, is the Saunders Mill that operated slightly south on the Tunitas Creek that actually used parts from the Fremont Mill. So we're going to continue our story and our journey up the Tunitas Creek Road, which is the same road that the Teamsters would take hauling lumber up from the mill to the summit. Compared to the mills on the east side of the summit of the Santa Cruz Mountains that had a one-day trip to Redwood City hauling their lumber, ox-driven Teamsters from Fremont's mill had a 2-day round-trip journey from the mill to Redwood City and back. And in the 1870s, when Fremont's mill was in full swing, these Teamsters were really the only ones taking this route. To support his workers during their journey, Fremont created the Summit Springs Hotel about half a mile west of the summit or skyline. While the community surrounding the hotel had many conveniences including a store, a blacksmith shop, a saloon, and a school, it was still a significant journey from the mill. Because of this, Teamsters preferred to stop near the mill office, which sat at the top of the grade after the long and difficult climb. Soon after, in this nameless community, a boarding house popped up, as well many jerry-rigged family homes. And due to the fact that this settlement popped up on company property, none of these families really owned their homes. Furthermore, the community was situated on a narrow ridge between the Tunitas and Purisma Canyon, allowing for very little livable ground. Quoted from Sawmills in the Redwoods by Frank Stagner, the result was, if a dweller in one of the better houses moved away, someone in a less desirable one took quick possession. Then, someone else, in turn, took his house, and thus there was a triggered game of musical chairs. Garden space was also grabbed since there was not much level land. And while the name is still somewhat historically debated, this is how Grabtown was born. When Sawmills in the Redwoods was written in the 60s, the author mentioned that there were no remnants of Grabtown remaining. 60 years later, it's the same situation. It's essentially just a road running along a ridge. Sources mention that the town was located on both sides of the road. However, today it seems like most of the flat ground along this ridge is located on the north side of the road. And looking along the south side here, you can see it's a pretty steep drop-off. Surprisingly, there are actually residences located on the north side of the road where I would assume the town site used to be located. And I'd like to mention that everything I'm filming here north of the road is actually private property, so I'd like to encourage anybody who's going to visit the area to not trespass. The fact that Grabtown was a true shanty town with no infrastructure or corporate money being pumped to it is likely the reason why there's virtually nothing remaining today. Furthermore, Fremont went out of business in 1878 and his property and mills exchanged owners at least 3 times before being ultimately abandoned in 1907. This means that Grabtown was likely completely uninhabited by just after the turn of the century. And since the entire town was located on company land, any remaining buildings were likely disassembled and the lumber was sold. While no structures remain in Grabtown, it's interesting to think that you're able to drive on the same road that Fremont had built in the 1800s and had tons and tons of lumber hauled through. And that concludes today's video. If you made it to the end, thanks for watching. Please make sure to subscribe because I have a lot more cool videos coming up soon.